Love this question. So I actually think that most things that people are getting from pull request reviews, they actually would get better from pair programming. And I'm super biased, so take this with a grain of salt. But let's talk about some of the things. So I think a lot of people do pull request review to catch bugs. Let's go back to sort of the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that it's really hard to review a pull request well. It takes, I think, a lot of mental energy and fortitude to really load up all of the required state and context in your head, and then to do a thoughtful review of it. I think people that can do this are kind of rare, honestly, and it requires a lot. Like I think it drains someone to do a PR review like that. So I think what you tend to get in practice is mostly cursory reviews. So it's, oh, this doesn't match style, or small things like variable names or method names or things like that. And I think that's partly because it's really hard to do a great review and really load it up in your head and like have deep insight about it and make great suggestions that are more significant. And even if you could do that fairly easily, there's a social cost to that. Like a pull request is kind of almost done already typically. Like if there's a social cost to being like, actually, this approach I think would be better with this massive change. Like asking a colleague to make a huge change to a pull request that they're hoping will just get merged is socially challenging. Not to say that there's not cultures that will support that, but I think it's probably on the rare side. So I think what you tend to get with a PR review is high level things, um, people getting interrupted to look at them, and not a ton of value. What people are hoping will happen with pull request reviews is catching bugs, improving quality of the code itself, like structure, and shared knowledge, right? Like the reducing the bus factor. And if instead of looking at the code when it's done, you look at it while it's being written and you write it with somebody, I think you get those things at much greater degrees. So you load the context together. And so there's not this onerous requirement to come along and load up a huge amount of context by yourself without the person who wrote the code helping you. Instead, there's two of you there. And so you can kind of help each other load the context and say, okay, what are we doing and what's going on? And what part of the system is this, and how does this that area that we're touching already work? Um, so I think you have a much better chance of two people really grokking the code. So now you have a better chance of catching bugs because you're actually paying a lot of attention. You have two brains fully loaded up. Um, you also have a much better chance of ending up with a better design because when you start down a bad path, well, first of all, maybe you just discuss more possible designs because you have two people looking at the thing. So you consider more options. Maybe the person you're pairing with just has more knowledge of like a pattern that might work there or an approach that has worked well for them in the past. And even if you don't discuss it ahead of time, if you start going down a path, maybe you're only 2 or 3 minutes in when your pair goes, you know, maybe do we actually want to do it this way? And sort of stops you before you're too deep. And so I think you have a much better chance of ending up with better design because again, you're not doing that thing where it's like, wow, you gave me this 900 line pull request, but I really don't think this is the right approach. But now I feel like a jerk. You're catching it much earlier. And then the knowledge sharing thing, I do think PR review probably helps share knowledge of the code base. Like if you're doing very thoughtful, rigorous code review, you do read the whole thing very carefully and understand the section that was there and understand what's changing. And so you do get exposed to what's going on and you're up to date. But pairing does that as well, although I would say probably to a likely deeper level because it's hard to do those really excellent reviews. And you're not just getting knowledge sharing on the code base itself, but in process and how to write great code and tools and debugging and what order do you write the test in? What are the steps of that refactoring? How methodical can you be? How often are you committing? What do what's your whip commit process, things like that. There's a million little um, techniques that make up being a really excellent developer, and you can spread those around the team. And I would argue those are probably even more valuable than just knowledge of the code base, because it's like you're investing in upping the quality of your team to whatever the highest quality is of developer on your team. So if you have a superstar and they do PR reviews, that can definitely help spread some knowledge. I've definitely learned stuff through code review, but pairing with somebody who's a superstar is just a much higher bandwidth way of getting your level closer to theirs. And my times of greatest improvement have been when I was pairing with people that were better at programming than I was. So, given that code review takes time, interrupts people, and is very challenging to do well, it's great if you can get rid of it. If you could get those benefits from something else, that would be wonderful. And I think pairing gives you actually probably more of the benefits that you're seeking with code review than code review does. It has the downside that it's also kind of draining for sure. Pairing is challenging mentally. Um, but if you're going to pay these costs somewhere, I think pairing gives you more bang for the buck of the cost. Yeah, hope that helped.